Hi, my name is Samuel Borgman, and I am the chairman and founder of the Please Dear God by Metroid Dread Foundation, or the PDGBMD for short. Here at the PDGBMD is our mission to spread awareness about a franchise that's on its last legs. Look at this poor franchise. Metroid has never been able to surpass 4 million units, and after 2 decade-long hiatuses, Nintendo's ready to put her down. But it doesn't have to be this way. You have the power to save Metroid! Starting on October 8th, the PDGBMD is hosting a special event. If you donate $60 to any major video game retail store, you'll be given 1 copy of Metroid Dread. That's right, you'll be given 1 copy of the brand new 2D Metroid for the Nintendo Switch. And you really should donate, because if you don't, I will hunt all of you down and... So my lawyers have just informed me that threatening potential donors is not the best strategy. So don't take that as a threat, just take it as a very strong suggestion. On June 15th, 2021, Nintendo hosted a Nintendo Direct to coincide with this year's E3. Arguably, the biggest reveal of this Direct is that there was a new 2D Metroid game that was to come out very soon. Metroid Dread is set to release on October 8th alongside the new Switch OLED model, and this is huge! I've seen a lot of people underestimate how important this game really is, saying things like, "Oh, it's just a 2D game," or "I won't buy this supplementary game, I'll wait for Prime 4 to come out." No, shut the fuck up. This is bigger than Prime 4, this is bigger than Mario Party Superstars, and this is even bigger than, dare I say, Breath of the Wild 2. Yeah, you heard me right. Metroid has always been an underrated series. It's one of Nintendo's oldest and most influential franchises. There's an entire video game genre that is named after the series, the Metroidvania to be specific, and nearly every indie game is an homage to Super Metroid. Despite being ingrained into gaming history, Metroid games have never sold as much as Nintendo's other IPs. This is because Nintendo has consistently marketed their systems towards children and casual gamers.
Woshi! It's a double Yoshi explosion!
No kids in the pool!
Because of this, Metroid has stagnated in growth and hasn't proven itself to be a viable series that is worth putting out on every platform, at least in the eyes of Nintendo. I believe that Metroid Dread can be the game that breaks this series out of its cult status rut and into the mainstream. I believe that this game has the potential to outsell every other Metroid game that preceded it, and I believe that Metroid Dread is the most important Metroid game since Metroid Prime. To understand the significance of Metroid Dread, we must wind the clocks back for a quick history lesson. In 1986, a little NES game released simply called Metroid. At the time, this game was revolutionary for its connected world and item-based progression system. It was also notable for, spoiler alert for a 35-year-old game, featuring one of the first female protagonists in video games, which is a tidbit that was revealed when Samus unmasked herself when you beat the game. What the frick, Reggie? I can't believe you put politics into my video games! This was very progressive for the time, but looking back, it's kind of undone by the game stripping her down to her underwear in the good ending of the game. You get it if you beat the game in under 3 hours, by the way, if you're interested in that shit. I know you're interested in them pixels, baby. Show me them pixels. Despite its innovations, Metroid 1 has been rendered obsolete by Father Time, and has been reduced to an archaic and confusing tech demo of what the series would become. Metroid ended up selling enough to warrant a 1989 sequel which came in the form of Metroid 2 Return of Samus for the Game Boy. With additions such as environmental storytelling, the beginnings of a cohesive narrative that spans throughout every game, and the iconic Various suit, this game did a lot to progress the franchise into what it would become. It wasn't helped by being stuck on a fucking calculator, so yeah, this one is pretty outdated too. In 1994, the series decided to grow up and become a man. I mean a woman. The post-pubescent series was revealed to the world with a new SNES title called Super Metroid, and they fucking nailed it, baby. The item-based progression is seamless. They know exactly how to guide you through this world without you even realizing you're being guided at all. The story from 2 is developed even further and has an emotional punch to your gut. The graphics are beautiful and each area is distinctive and memorable. The 16-bit era has aged perfectly, and this is one of the best looking games of that generation. The soundtrack is melancholic and introspective, unnerving, intense, upbeat, and valiant. There are very, very few pieces of art that I consider to be perfect, and Super Metroid is one of these rare masterpieces that make the list. I could go on forever about this game, but A, everything I could say has already been said by someone else more qualified to review games, and B, this video isn't a review of Super Metroid, so I should probably get back on topic before this video goes completely off the rails. So Super Metroid sold pretty well, and the future of the series was looking great. If only we knew that this was going to be the last taste of Metroid for a while, as the series was about to enter its first hibernation period. An entire console generation went by without an appearance from Samus Aran, other than as a fighter in the first Smash game, of course. There were multiple attempts to get a successor to Metroid 3 off the ground, but none of those would come to fruition. Now, I completely understand why there wasn't a 5th generation Metroid. The two consoles out at the time were the N64 and the Game Boy Color. The N64 kinda had an unspoken mandate that every game on it either had to be 3D or at least have a 3D art style, but 3D graphics were still kinda fucking hideous, and the industry didn't quite know how to make consistently good 3D games yet. And if they went with the Game Boy Color, it would have felt like a step backwards for the series, since power-wise, the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color are equals. It's understandable that they would hold off on making another Metroid until the next console generation came around, and oh boy, did they make another Metroid. In the 2001 Space World Convention, Nintendo broke the ice and informed the public that Metroid was coming back after an 8-year hiatus, with not one, but 2 new games. Metroid Prime, the series' big break into 3D, and Metroid Fusion, a direct sequel to Super Metroid. At first, people were quite skeptical about Metroid Prime being a first-person shooter developed by some blokes in Texas, but then the game came out and people learned the error of their ways, and Metroid Prime became the best-selling Metroid game despite being on a failed console. Prime is a perfect transition to 3D for the franchise. Even though it went from side-scroller to first-person shooter, Retro Studios understood the fundamentals and appeal of the series and carried over every aspect that made Metroid, Metroid. Metroid Fusion, aka Metroid 4, ended up being the more divisive game. It's on the Game Boy Advance, which power-wise is an SNES you can realistically shove up your ass. Don't lie, we've all tried to shove the Game Boy Advance SP model up our ass. This game is much more comparable to Metroid 3. It also helps that this game is a direct sequel to Super, while the Prime games are treated as more of a spin-off series. I would describe Fusion as the anti-Super Metroid, in a good way. Where Super specialized in a world you could explore at your own pace and even sequence break in ways that allow you to fight every boss in any order, Fusion is way more linear with an emphasis on story and combat. I personally like what I've played of Fusion. In fact, the atmosphere of this game is horrifically incredible, but many fans discard it for being too unlike Super. And that's about it for 2D Metroid. Other than a remake of the first Metroid which repurposed Fusion's engine, that is. Despite being in the middle of a big Metroid renaissance with the Prime series getting 5 more games, the 2D games just stopped there. This is especially lame because Metroid Fusion is currently the last game of the Metroid timeline, and Metroid Fusion ended on a cliffhanger, so we just have no idea what happens after it. From 2005 to 2008, there were whispers of a hypothetical Metroid 5 being in development for the Nintendo DS under the name of Metroid Dread. Let's just put a little pin in this information because it might come back later. I can't say for sure, but the relevance of this thing that I just told you, it might be a little bit significant. I can't say for sure though. Just maybe a bit of foreshadowing. I don't know. I'm no fucking movie director. Just put a pin in that. And you know what? Who cares if the 2D games are over? We're still getting all the Prime games. Metroid's in full swing, baby. Let's keep it up. Let's go. Let's ride this franchise to the sunset. Oh look. Metroid Prime 3 didn't sell very well despite being on the largest Nintendo console of all time, and it's a bookend for the Prime trilogy. Well, that's okay. I hear they're working on a new Metroid game that's gonna delve into the past of Samus Aran and bring a lot of elements from the 2D games into 3D. That seems exciting. Oh look! Metroid Other M is a travesty. Well, time for Metroid's second hibernational period. Woohoo! Hey guys, post-production Sam here, and I'm just here to let you know that I did not want to play Other M for the footage, so accept these clips of an equally tragic event. Thanks. Metroid went into its second hibernation period, but this time it wasn't on a high note like Super Metroid. Metroid Other M was a character assassination piece on Samus Aran, making the fearless bounty hunter out to be a subservient and emotional, but at the same time emotionless, bitch. It ditched the exploration and item-based progression the series is known for, and you have to control it by using a sideways Wii remote. No, I am not joking, you cannot play this with any other controller setup. They were trying to force some sixth sense of art through adversary, but you can't force that. Why would you do that? That ruined this game's only possible saving grace, which was an admittedly cool-looking combat system to have less depth than the piss in my pants. Metroid fans lost all hope, and when most of the 8th console generation went by without an appearance from Samus, Metroid was declared a dead franchise. It's 2015 and Nintendo is preparing to announce a new Metroid game. Real shit? Oh. It's a spiritual successor to the OK multiplayer shooter game on the DS. Oh, and it looks low budget as fuck. Oh, okay. Oh. Okay. I wish Metroid games existed. Hey guys, post-production Samborg back at it again with another announcement. So, the script originally had a segment about AM2R that was supposed to play while I was talking about Federation Force, but that part of the video got cut out, so I'm just here to mention that AM2R was a fan game developed on the 30th anniversary of Metroid, and Nintendo DMCA'd the guy and didn't hire him and didn't do anything for Metroid's 30th anniversary. And no, their own remake of Metroid 2 released a year later does not forgive their behavior. Anyways, back to the video. And now, Metroid was ended forever. For real this time, and they never made another Metroid game again. Until literally the year after, where they announced 2 new Metroid games at their 2017 E3 showcase, in the forms of a 4th Prime game, and their own remake of Metroid 2 called Samus Returns, which was made by Mercury Steam. Those guys actually have experience in the Metroidvania genre, with the other half of that name, Castlevania. Okay, actually, I haven't been completely honest. They revealed Prime 4 at E3, but they didn't show Samus Returns until a little Treehouse livestream thing that very few people actually watched. While Samus Returns was a pretty good return to form for the series needed, it wasn't the greatest Metroid game. It's probably a B-tier Metroid game if I'm being honest. It also didn't sell too well because Nintendo absolutely refused to promote it at all, and it released on the 3DS in 2017. You know, the year the Switch came out, the year that Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, two of the biggest Nintendo games in decades, came out. Yeah, it's not that big a surprise that Metroid 2 on the 3DS was overshadowed a bit. I honestly didn't know this game existed until last year, and I consider myself to be a pretty big Nintendo fan. I mean, I own a Wii U, and don't own a Wii U if you don't already. It does something to you. So yeah, this brought a lot of hope to the Metroid fans. And then all of this hope was immediately crushed 2 years later when they scrapped all of the Metroid Prime 4 development and started from the beginning without any word on when we might see a reveal or any information on this game.
Nintendo really hates us, huh?
Nintendo's 2021 E3 showcase fixed that when Nintendo not only confirmed that Metroid 4 still existed, but announced that they had another Metroid game to show us. I gotta commend them on this reveal, because they knew exactly what to show about this game and what order to show it in. It starts with Samus dropping into view with a new suit that looks like it could be an upgraded fusion suit. Before you can even process this information, they drop the first title card. Yes, they are officially calling this game Metroid 5, indicating that they're finally making a follow-up to Fusion. Then the trailer shows us this creepy robot stalking Samus in a 2.5D environment, which tells us that A, this game is going to play like Samus Returns, and B, this game is kind of adapting the scripted chase segments from Fusion, but with modern technology and programming. After that, they drop the real title of the game. Wow, they're making another Metroid 2 remake? I thought they already did that. Nah, just kidding. Yes, this is it. This is the Metroid Dread that was rumored all those years ago. They also show more of the game, like some power-ups, bosses, and a living Chozo. Could this be the evil Chozo that was hinted at Samus Returns? But who cares about that? This is Metroid Dread. This is the Half-Life 3 of Nintendo. After all that orgasmic material, they flash the title again to remind us that this is real, and then, BAM! Release date, which is mere months away from now. This reveal was carefully crafted in a lab for Metroid fans, and it pretty much revived the series in everyone's eyes. Before now, we had slight hopes for the series to continue existing, since we had Samus Returns come out, and Prime 4 allegedly was still existing. But now, we're getting the most awaited follow-up title in Nintendo history, besides Kid Icarus Rising. I guess people kinda wanted that more.
Okay, that's cool, I guess. I mean, I don't know what a Metroid is, so I don't really know why I should care, personally.
Well, my hypothetical viewer, you're in good hands. I'm gonna try and sell you on the Metroid series. Now answer me this. Do you like Hollow Knight, Dark Souls, Resident Evil, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Axiom Verge, or Cave Story? Well, all of these games I listed are either full-on Metroidvanias or Metroidvania adjacent, or if you prefer the scientific term, action search games. I suppose now is the best time to explain what an action search game is. Let's look to
Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia at en.wikipedia.org.
The least trustworthy source of information in the eyes of my history professor, at least. Like, come on dude, did Wikipedia fuck your wife? Well, according to Wikipedia, a Metroid action search game is a 2D platformer set in an interconnected world that you must gain access to more of by acquiring power-ups and upgrades that act as keys to unlock more of the game. I don't completely agree with this synopsis because it states that a game must be a 2D side-scroller to be an action search game, while I think that action search games are... I don't want to say action search game anymore. When you can't classify Metroid Prime as a Metroidvania under your definition, you've messed something up. Other than that though, I'd say that's a pretty apt explanation to what a Metroidvania is. An interconnected world that you must unlock more of with weapon upgrades. A big part of Metroidvanias are branching paths. Let's say that you're at a fork in the road and you don't really know which path to take. You randomly decide to take the left path, and after a bit of walking, you are stopped by a bunch of shrubbery blocking your way. You then backtrack to the fork and take the right path instead. You find another dead end, but there's also some garden shears laying on the ground. Then you realize, hey, if I take this new item back to the other path, I'll be able to cut down the bush and continue on that way. Oh, also you're in a zombie apocalypse and you can use the garden shears to decapitate zombies because the keys must also act as weapons or augmentations of your movement, or it's a key-based game and there's no point. That explanation was a very miniaturized and simplified version of how Metroidvania works. There are usually at least 5 branching paths in a given area, and each way leads to more branching paths until eventually some of the paths lead back into areas you've already explored or are straight up dead ends. Also, if you want to get in the series but don't know which game to play first, Metroid games usually start with a recap of the previous games, so you can't go wrong starting with Metroid Dread. If you still want to try the other Metroid games, these 5 games are very acceptable starting points for the series, but I'd recommend choosing from Metroid Zero Mission, because it's a remake of the original and is a pretty short and streamlined experience, Metroid Prime because it has a hint system and it was the first one I ever beat, or Super Metroid because you can play it on an NSO subscription on the Switch, and it's the gold standard for the series. Arlo did a much more in-depth video on what games to play and where you can play them, so if you want to check that out, I've linked it in the description. But as a short summary, you can play every Metroid game other than the Metroid 2 remake on the Wii U, so I guess that thing has a point after all. So now hopefully you understand what you're getting yourself into with a Metroid game. If that sounds appealing to you, then great, go pre-order Metroid Dread. If you think that sounds intimidating or not something you're into, great, go pre-order Metroid Dread. Even if you're not going to play it, you should still buy Metroid Dread as an investment. Nintendo has a large collection of dormant franchises and IPs. Metroid was one of these IPs, and will most likely become dormant again if this game doesn't sell at least 2 million copies. You see, Nintendo doesn't really listen to what the fans or critics say, despite everyone being vocal about the new Super Mario Bros. Series being a fucking disgrace and everyone being tired of them. Nintendo took a glance at the first 2 selling 30 million copies and decided to put 2 new Super Marios out in the same year. Fire Emblem 3 Houses sold 3 million units and counting, which has led Nintendo to make more of those types of games, like a lot more. And it's only been 2 years. What I'm trying to say is that if Metroid Dread does well, it may influence Nintendo to revive some of their other sci-fi and more mature franchise. Maybe we'll get a new game in Nintendo's other series that takes place in space, or perhaps a new game starring another Nintendo bounty hunter in a futuristic setting. Either way, the Switch could use some more diversity, and buying Metroid Dread will help with that. I believe in Metroid Dread. The Nintendo Switch as a platform has brought many game series to heights they have previously never reached. Fire Emblem 3 Houses has surpassed every other game in the series in 2 years. Luigi's Mansion 3 has sold over 10 million copies. And Animal Crossing New Horizons has outsold the big Mario game, the most important Zelda game since Ocarina of Time, and the most content-packed Smash Bros. Game in just over a year. Even with that, I'm a little afraid of people simply writing this game off and waiting for Prime 4, because Prime 4 might not even be on the Switch at this rate. I mean, it's been 7 years since Retro Studios has published a game, 15 years since they last made a Prime game, and most of their original staff has left the company, so I wouldn't be surprised if it took them a few more years to brew up a new Prime game. And who knows what the next Nintendo console will be like. People have also said that they won't spend $60 on a 2D game, which is bull. Now we're at the end of the video, and with that I have one request for all of you. please shill this game as hard as you possibly can. Tell your friends who own Switches. Tell your friends who don't own Switches. Tell your mom, your dad, your rubber duck, the fucking homeless man selling meth at the end of your street. Tell anyone you can, because this series needs all the support it can get. And with that, I've been Samborg, and you've been Epic. Thanks for watching. Okay, so just a reminder, in Metroid 2, Samus goes to the planet SR380